Green tea. Green tea is the iconic tea style of the Eastern world, and though the overall process to make it is quite simple, like other types of tea, there is a lot of nuanced skill involved in doing it well. Green teas are very capable of capturing the essence of delicate springtime aromas. They can be floral, grassy, fruity, vegetal, marine like, herbal, or they can taste like wet paper. Uninteresting hot leaf juice, typically flavored with lemon or some other strong ingredients which are added to mask the blandness of the low quality tea. This is truly the unfortunate side of green tea and not what we're going to be talking about here. A good green tea starts by plucking suitably good leaves. Young leaves have less going on chemically than old leaves, and this is beneficial to obtaining this purity of flavor that's sought after in most green tea. The older the tea leaf gets before being picked, the more potential flavor it will have, but that flavor is tied to negative aspects such as bitterness and astringency, and striking the proper balance between these aspects and the flavor using mature leaves is an art form in itself. But when the producer is trying to capture the essence of spring, they don't usually want to be dealing with so many moving parts, and thus the young leaves are preferred. Younger leaves are ideal for making green tea, and in most parts of the world, that is what's used. There are some exceptions though. For example, China's Anhui province makes melon seed green tea, or Liuan Guapian, which uses these more mature leaves. While in Japan, in the case of, let's say, the non-region specific banchas, mature leaves are also used here. It's in these teas where you can expect flavors like bitter melon, dry grass, and an overarching sour, brisk note to be the main attraction in the cup, other than the cheap price tag. These bancha teas are interesting, but they're not a mark of quality or finesse. It stands to reason that by looking at a dried tea, you can tell a lot about what leaves were harvested. Though just because the leaves are young, it doesn't necessarily mean they're small in size. There are different varieties of the tea bush, and using Anhui province as another example, you'll find another famous green tea here called Taiping Ho Kue, which the dried leaf clusters are up to 6 inches long. And then there's the teas of Yunnan's province. So on average, they have a much larger leaf size because the type of the tea bush grown here is another subspecies of the tea plant altogether. It's not often that you'll see single bud green teas like silver needles, but they do exist. The whole unopened buds are very difficult to roll without breaking them. So the bud green teas usually just get knocked around a little bit instead of being rolled, but it's this lack of rolling which causes these teas to be somewhat atypical for standard green tea flavors, and they tend to be more in the vein of yellow tea flavor wise. The reason why is something I'll cover very soon. I usually encounter these bud teas coming from, I guess, only Sichuan, China. And the couple that I've had to look out for, or what I would recommend to look out for, are called sparrow's tongue and bamboo leaf, that translated to English. It is not rare at all to see very young, white pekoe covered tea leaves mixed with green leaves in the higher quality green teas, especially when they're coming from China. Examples of those might be Bilochun or Mengding Ganlu, even in a good Longjing or Dragonwell, though in Dragonwell it's admittedly a little more difficult to spot these trichomes or these little white Picot because during the firing process they get kind of muddled together and they look almost like little spider nests are growing on the dry tea. But anyway, this is just a byproduct of its production process. Then there's jasmine teas. You get your jasmine pearls, a pretty famous tea around the world. They also show off these bands of white Picot in a very stylish way. And you'll often see jasmine teas created with a green tea base instead of a white tea base due to the rolling process. Again, and I'll cover that soon. Two more things. Caffeine is a natural defense mechanism that the tea bush has against pests. Bugs don't like it. So in seasons where new growth is likely to be exposed to danger, so let's say spring especially, caffeine is pumped into the youngest leaves to protect them from insects so that it can keep growing. As the leaf grows, caffeine content will lower, and thus more mature leaves have less caffeine than younger leaves. If caffeine was the driving factor to drink tea, it is very fortunate for us that it exists in the most delicious parts of the tea as well. Now, second to caffeine, there is a very sought-after chemical compound called theanine, and this is unique to the tea plant. This is concentrated in young leaves, and it is slowly destroyed by sunlight over time. It's theanine, which is the reason why tea can be described as sweet or savory, while not having any sugar or salt in it. Knowing that when you grow tea in shady conditions, you'll get more theanine, and the green tea will taste better, you could also look for tea-producing areas that get a lot of natural shade. So that could be from morning fog, it could be from mountain cover, using shade trees, or growing tea in a forest, or even just like the farming practices. For example, in Japan, they'll use shading mats above their tea plants. And so this is done in, for example, Japan's really high-end exquisite teas like Gyokuro and matcha. We just talked about a lot of stuff, so let me recap just some of the main points really quickly. High quality green tea almost always uses young leaves. Low quality green tea almost always uses mature leaves. High quality green tea is picked in the spring. So in China there's a festival called the Qingming, and this is usually around April 4th or 5th. So the best of the teas that China makes in the realm of green, black, they come from before this festival. Afterwards, they just arguably get lower and lower in quality. You need to roll teas to get access to the most exciting flavors, and we haven't really talked about this yet, and that young leaves have the most theanine and the most caffeine. So while all of that was about what leaves to pick, after picking comes the withering process. And the withering of green tea is not very long, and in most cases it's just the time it takes from when the leaf is picked by the picker and brought to the factory, or the location where this kill green process occurs. So the kill green process is when the leaves are heated up to at least 65 degrees Celsius or about 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and by doing so you can stop an enzyme or deactivate an enzyme which causes oxidation in the tea. And you can lock a tea green forever. And so this is primarily where we can start to talk about what makes Chinese green tea different from Japanese. So Japan in general, they use steam to do this kill green process. And their teas get subdivided by a light steaming, a regular steaming, and deep steaming. The initial goal is the same. You kill those enzymes, but the resulting tea turns out quite different. The deep steaming teas tend to get quite brittle, and they have a richer, more robust flavor due to the small particles of tea which get suspended in the liquid. Japanese teas also, they tend to be quite green and vibrant in color due to the steaming process. Japan, in some cases, steam their teas for as few as 7 seconds. There's a guy in Honyama that was famous for this. But anyway, usually it's far more. I would say like light steaming teas start from 15 seconds and they go up to 3 minutes for deep steamed tea. China, on the other hand, they use a wok in general to fry the leaves until those enzymes are killed. And within Chinese teas, you can tell a tremendous amount about their quality by the color of the tea that you can brew from them. If it enters into the brown spectrum, it's no good. Using direct heat like a wok to kill these enzymes is very difficult to do without singeing or scorching some of these leaves. And if some of the leaves are over fried, the liquor will turn brown. Or at least it'll take it out of the green spectrum and it'll put it into the yellow spectrum. You can also smell it. So if you can get this kind of burned, fried, oily quality, it's no good. And with very few exceptions, which are notably Japan's hojicha tea, or some of these regional banchas which get roasted, or in the case of Chinese teas, rock oolongs like dahongpao, or a black tea called lapsang souchong. Finding roasted, smoky, or otherwise burned aromas are not what quality focus producers try to put out in any style of tea. After the Kilgreen process comes what is vital to all of the super interesting teas of the world. It's rolling. This rolling process is so key to every type of tea with so few exceptions that to not really understand it would render all of this other information pretty much useless. So imagine the leaf. Imagine the leaf has millions of tiny cells made of fiber holding in water and other chemicals. Some cells in one area have chemical A, while other cells somewhere else have chemical B. Perhaps the cells closer to the surface have chemical C. Now, normally these chemicals will never interact with each other. They are just there for the plant to use as it goes about living. They're trapped in their cells. But by plucking the leaf and rolling it, you can break those cells and you can free up these vigilante chemicals to do whatever they want. The awesome aromas and flavors in tea of almost all types come from the marriage of these chemicals. And in green tea, that's where it stops. Once those chemical combinations are obtained, the leaf is dried out, and in the case of a jasmine tea, like I mentioned earlier, when these cells are broken up, they're very prone to being able to take in foreign aromas. And so when you're scenting a tea with jasmine, it's a lot easier for that jasmine fragrance to kind of permeate the leaf in a green tea than in an unrolled tea like a white tea. In oolong and other types of tea, this process can start to begin earlier. And so those chemical combinations, they get exposed to subsequent oxidation. So in a bruising process before the Kilgreen, for example. And afterwards, these chemicals can go through a kind of a Maillard reaction in the sense of roasting or baking the tea to kind of coax out new flavors. But we won't get into any of that yet. That's for the next episode. 4 of the green teas mentioned in this recording are for sale on my site. If you are into learning a little bit more about different styles of green tea in particular, please check out some of the links. As always, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you learned something.